Michael, thank you. It really is an honor to be here. I'm so appreciative of the work that Michael does in so many ways, and what he's done with building the middle class out in his conversations there and his exhortations there, and just the work that he's done forever. And I saw a number of you that started your careers at the Washington Monthly. And I read the Washington Monthly when I was like 20 years old and saw these young up-and-coming media stars. I know he didn't pay much. I know that Charles Peters wasn't easy to work with, but nonetheless. So thank you. And there's some advantages to being a former senator. I can dress like this. While you dress up, I don't really quite understand why talking about working class and working people were at the St. Regis instead of the Holiday Inn, but that's your decision, Michael. And another advantage of being a former senator is I never have to be in the same room with Ted Cruz again. So there are some positive things to this. So thank you for your work in progressive politics, and the fight obviously will go on and increase with increasing passion. And I appreciate all that you do that way. A lot of people have since November been asking the same question: what went wrong over the last 4 years? Why did this administration's policies, many of them good ones, why didn't they resonate with people? And I want to give two answers and then discuss it. And I know that this has been a good day, and Katie in my office in the back has been here through much of the day while I've been to Washington essentially since I left office. So I just had a couple meetings I needed to do. Two answers that I want to start with. First, of course, was inflation. For people in Ohio, it seemed like the White House was essentially oblivious to what they were seeing in their own lives, or worse, trying to deny the very real price increases that were killing them every time they went to the grocery store. My wife and I, after church, almost every Sunday stopped at a local grocery store. We heard it. People of all incomes occasionally see somebody at the checkout counter turning something they were going to buy back. That's pretty strong, and you heard people in the White House call it transitory, and you heard them say that, well, it's higher in Europe. That doesn't mean a whole lot to a family in Wheeling, West Virginia, or Champaign-Urbana, Illinois, or Shelby, Ohio. But all of us who care about middle-out economics, it'd be a mistake to use inflation as an excuse not to take a deeper look at what's gone wrong with all of us as progressives. But for all the legislating over the last 4 years, much of it designed to put government on the side of working families. We hear over and over, and I agree with this, that Biden was the most pro-labor. This administration was the most pro-labor administration, certainly since FDR, since LBJ, maybe since FDR. But Americans didn't see this administration as a break with the past. And fundamentally, I think that's it. They saw 2016 as a break with the past. They saw 2020 as a break with the past. They saw 2024 as a break with the past. Since the election, what is happening with working class voters seems to be the obsession. For the moment, for reporters and pundits and consultants, people come in. There's always people parachuting into Youngstown, Ohio, to Mahoning Valley, and what went wrong. Counties that I always got over 60% in the two urban counties around Youngstown. Harris lost them by a lot, and I lost them, never in my career even close did I lose those two counties. So the attitude, I think, when it's not paying attention, when there is, we want something different, the attitude is, listen to us, we know better. And that's, I think, what came out of Washington in races all over the country. It's not complicated, it's not mysterious. We have an economy that doesn't reward work. You all know that, does not value the work of Americans without 4-year college degrees, where people cannot keep up with the cost of living no matter how hard they work. Over the past 40 years, you know this, corporate profits have gone up markedly. CEO salaries have exploded upwards. Productivity of workers has gone up, yet workers' wages have essentially been flat. In fact, workers, what we hear over and over is almost no matter as people's socioeconomic status, to a point that workers are bringing in less money, that people are seeing more money go out than come in. Productivity and wages used to rise together. Most of you in this room, maybe all of you, are old enough to remember that. As productivity went up, wages went up. That changed in the late 70s. Workers' produce more and more, but they enjoy a smaller and smaller share. Maybe enjoys not the right verb, a smaller and smaller share of the wealth they create. The cost of living keeps going up. People don't have enough money, as I said, coming in the door as more money goes out the door. Let's be clear, a couple of years of modestly rising wages are not going to make up for decades of Americans working together, working harder than ever with less and less to show for it. A few years ago, I was in Cincinnati at an AFL-CIO dinner, and as people in my profession do, before the dinner started, I walked table to table. There was a table near the front, 5 or 6 people. I mean, it was at Holiday Inn, so the tables were smaller. I walked up to one table. There were 5 or 6 middle-aged women there, and I said, what brings you here? And they said, we signed our first union contract today. And I said, tell me about it. She said, we represent 1,200 custodial workers. And she was more polite than the way I'm going to tell it, that essentially they work all night cleaning buildings for people like us to go in and enjoy clean workplaces. But she said, it's 1,200 of us, we signed our first union contracts. What's that mean to you? She said, I'm 51 years old, first time in my life I'll have a paid 1-week vacation. I mean, think about that. Most people in Ohio, people like that, and not just people that have not had a union before, people that get treated a little better at work. Most people believe the system is rigged against them, and they're right. In my mind, it started in the early, maybe before this, but it accelerated in the early 90s with NAFTA. The attitudes on display have infected so much thinking about the economy in Washington. My first year in Congress, I led the freshman charge in opposition to NAFTA. There were 100 freshmen and 60 Democrats, 60 Democrats, 40 Republicans in the Congress, and we had a strong vote in both parties out against NAFTA. But I'll never forget Bill Richardson, many of you know and liked him. Bill was one of the senior Democrats whipping pro-NAFTA votes, and he and I were friends, and he used to call me Brownie, the only person I've ever known that did that, and he'd say, Brownie, damn it, every time we have a recess, I come back, and I got to work harder because we lose votes. I said, Bill, there's a reason for that. When you go home, people don't like NAFTA, yet you persist. In my campaign this year, I ran for re-election. I've won 3 times. I lost this year. In this campaign, I still hear about NAFTA. Nobody knows exactly what it is, maybe not what it stands for, but it's one of those trade agreements, and people still know what it meant to their communities, especially in Youngstown, especially in Dayton. I remember during the NAFTA fight, somebody that works at National Airport said they never saw so many corporate jets at National Airport as they did during the NAFTA fight. That should tell us something too. And then they followed up, and I say they, mostly meaning corporate special interests and complicit politicians of both parties. They followed up with something called most favored nation status with China. That's what they literally called it in the first couple of years. They realized that didn't sound so good, so they changed the mode to PNTR, permanent normal trade relations with China. But talk to anyone in a manufacturing town. You go to any community in the Midwest, in the South, and lots of other places, and they can tell you NAFTA, in the beginning of NAFTA, what it meant. People felt gaslit, they felt condescending to leaders in both parties, and they really did tell us in the early 90s these deals would lift everyone up. They said it's the future. It will help to stop wars. It will help to end poverty. Mr. Harris, it will usher in a new glorious era of prosperity and innovation. I had one woman said to me, I went to an Ivy League school, and she said to me, how a woman in Cleveland, manufacturer, she inherited her company, of course. She said, how could anybody that went to Yale be against free trade? I mean, that was the attitude of people all over the country. And that doesn't surprise you because you've heard it too. They frankly looked down on people that disagreed. I remember campaigning with one national Democrat, and he said, Sherrod, you're in the wrong, you're fighting the last war. And then I heard, you're on the wrong side of history. That's what free trade, those fights in the 90s and early 2000s were all about. Then they'd say, don't worry, we'll compensate the losers. And I think as Professor Knight, who's still here, I guess he talked earlier today about a paper he's working on calling Compensating the Losers. As if they passed TAA, they never funded it well enough, but you lose your job, you lose a middle-class job, and it'll give you a little money to get through it until you can go to community college and get trained and get a job but make less money. But the compensating the losers, they're unaware of how insulting that term was to those workers. As if any amount of compensation would replace the dignity, and I'll get to that in a second, that word, that you get from a good middle-class job with schools, with skills you're proud of, where you have the peace of mind of knowing you can afford to support yourself and your family, maybe a week vacation once in a while, maybe taking your kids to a ball game, maybe saving a little money for your kids' college. It's what leaders, frankly, of our party and the other party have missed, not just on trade, but in the entire project that often gets called neoliberalism. We've allowed the financial industry, which runs so much of this stuff, and multinational corporations to run wild, essentially letting Wall Street run this economy. The progressive response has largely been, we'll try to do enough redistribution in taxes and spending to make up for all the ways it's hurt workers. We didn't do that. We didn't get close to that, of course. Beyond that, the solution is unpopular and, frankly, as I said, insulting workers. Too often, people in Washington end up sounding like they think workers in the heartland are charity cases. I mean, that's what people in my part of the world heard. But most people don't want what they view as a government handout. They want to be left. They don't want to be left to fend for themselves in an unfair market rigged against them. They want a level playing field so their hard work can actually pay off and they can actually afford a decent standard of living and a decent life. Since leaving the Senate in January, my next to the last vote was one of my proudest moments. It was after midnight. I've cast 13,000 votes in the House and Senate. We passed the Social Security Fairness Act. I'd worked for 10 years when that was the next to the last vote. 250,000 Ohioans will benefit from the Social Security Fairness Act. But once leaving office, my focus has continued to be what it was throughout my life, and that is the dignity of promoting workers and the dignity of work. The term dignity of work first began with Pope Leo in the 1890s. Pope Leo handed out a dictum, or I'm not a Catholic, whatever they call those things. Dictum, or what is it? Help me. Harold, you don't know, right? You're not a Catholic. Okay. Called Rerum Novarum, and it was the first time that I can see, I'm doing some writing about this, the first time that I can remember or know of that an international figure talked about international workers. And, Rerum Novarum, he was a capitalist to be sure, but he thought workers should be treated fairly and talked about dignity. 6 decades later, Dr. King talked repeatedly about the dignity of work. He spoke at union halls all over the Northeast and Midwest, bringing workers together, white and black workers, as much as he could, and talked about the dignity of work. So I just launched earlier this week something called the Dignity of Work Institute. It's not a think tank, because that sort of suggests to me passive. It's going to be much more active and aggressive than that. The Dignity of Work Institute. It's nonpartisan. It's not nonprofit. It's dedicated to creating an economy where workers benefit from the wealth they create, to actually make workers the winners in our economy. Research is going to be a big part of our work. We began with a national survey of over 1,000 people. We oversampled young voters and young people. We oversampled African American and Latinos. I'm not in the survey. It's not political. It really is to find out what workers think. It's clear the way people in Washington measure and talk about the economy in terms of unemployment rate, in terms of inflation, is fundamentally flawed. It doesn't really reflect the reality of workers' lives. And I think that's why we all were a bit nonplussed that Biden wasn't getting the credit for a good economy that we thought he should, for an economy we thought was probably better than it was in terms of measuring by inflation, measuring by unemployment. We've heard president after president told how great the economy is, citing those two things, unemployment or inflation. But statistics going deeper with this survey and beyond, tell us a different story. Most people now think they have to work multiple jobs just to get ahead. That's how low workers' expectations have gotten about the economy. 60% of workers have worked, these are all workers, these aren't just moderate and low income, they're all workers. 60% have worked more than one job, including a quarter of workers who've worked more than one job just during the last 2 years. Large numbers have essentially given up on the aspiration they might have had before of owning a home. Less than half of Americans say they could comfortably afford, fewer than half of Americans say they could comfortably afford an unexpected $1,000 expense. a low unemployment rate or low inflation rate coming down doesn't mean nearly as much as people here want to believe if Americans have to work 2 jobs. We shouldn't be surprised that people want fundamental change. We gave people a scale. This is pretty striking to me. We gave people a scale of 1 to 10, as pollsters often do, and asked how much change do you think the economy needs for people like you to get ahead? How much change do you think the economy needs for you to get ahead? 1 means no change, 10 means throw out everything almost and start again. Nearly a third said 10 out of 10. Overall, half said 8, 9, or 10. Think we need the economy totally upended and start again. Workers keep telling us the status quo isn't working, that was clear last year. It's why we've seen these election results, I think. It's why people essentially want a wrecking ball in the economy. I don't want to get into that's what Trump's doing. It essentially is, but I don't think they want a wrecking ball aimed at Medicaid or aimed at veterans benefits or laying off workers that inspect our food. That's another conversation. But Trump wants a wrecking ball, but he's not wrecking anything that's going to benefit workers. We know that. Not every voter understands that. People voted for change, but I don't think that firing veterans at the Chillicothe or the Cleveland VA is what they had in mind. But where's the wrecking ball for the corporations that are still raising prices? Where's the wrecking ball for Wall Street that's built a system that rewards CEOs no matter how effective they are? People want this change that benefits them. They don't want change that benefits Tesla stockholders. And right now, I would argue neither party has an agenda to create the kind of dramatic change that workers want. This is a project that the progressive movement has to understand if it wants to include workers without college degrees, workers who didn't go to fancy schools, workers who don't live in Washington or New York or San Francisco. We have to start with listening. That's what the Dignity of Work Institute is going to do first. That's what we're doing with these polls, with focus groups, with conversations all over the country. We're not starting with a series of policy prescriptions. I know what my biases are. I know what I think works. I need to know more to do that. We start with surveys, we start with focus groups, we start with roundtables, hearing directly from American workers about their lives and the kind of economy they want to see. We're going to learn a lot from American workers about the direction our country should go, but I'll leave with one idea for the kinds of fights a progressive movement, I think, needs to take on. 3 weeks after the November election, I believe, an East Texas federal judge handed out a decision on overtime. You may know Julie Sue, or you may know present laws. If you make $35,000, $40,000, $45,000, $50,000 a year, your employer can classify you as management, and then you get no overtime no matter how many hours you work. Secretary Sue, Labor Department under Biden, raised that number to, I believe, 56,000. So it meant that if you're making 40 or 50 or 55,000 a year, management has to pay, no matter how they classify you, has to pay you time and a half for those hours away from your family, those hours at work. The East Texas judge, Trump appointee, of course, struck down that rule coming from a lawsuit from the Texas Chamber of Commerce. You know what it means? One judge, one district in East Texas, one day handed out one decision that meant 4 million workers won't get overtime. 4 million workers that are working 45 or 50 hours a week. But did you hear anything about it? I don't think journalists wrote about it. I know my profession didn't talk about it. I would talk about it at caucus those last 4 or 5 weeks. We didn't get much of an update. Those are the kind of fights we make. It's not a handout to these workers. It's giving workers what they earned. And it's what we heard so clearly in this poll. I don't want to put too much in one poll. We also didn't lead people into answers. We had a lot of open-ended questions for the survey. But essentially, there's too much money going out the door and not enough coming in. This fight, to me, goes right to the heart of dignity of work. That we fight for workers in the workplace, not necessarily wanting charity. They want a fair shake. They want a fair wage. They want decent working conditions. We may go back to the Democrats shouldn't be the Republicans will always be the party that serves the rich. The Democrats don't want to be the party that compensates the losers. We want to be the dignity of work party. We want to be the party that makes workers the winners in our economy. We want to be the party that helps workers share in the wealth it creates. What my mission is with Dignity of Work Institute, it's what the progressive movement needs to fully commit to. And I thank so many of you for your work for a more progressive country. Thank you.